I lowered my 8-year-old son into the ground with no one beside me. No family, no prayers, no goodbye hugs. Across town, champagne glasses were clinking, celebrating the money meant for his future. The morning my son died, the world didn't stop. That was the first thing that broke me. Cars still passed outside the hospital. Nurses still laughed softly at the desk. A man complained about the vending machine being out of Diet Coke. Everything kept moving while I stood frozen beside a bed that was suddenly too small, too quiet, too final. Ethan had been sick for months. Not the dramatic kind of sick people notice right away. The slow kin, fatigue, headaches, bruises that took too long to fade. I'd taken him to urgent care twice before anyone said the word that changes everything. Leukemia, aggressive, rare. I remember nodding while the doctor spoke, like my body had decided this was happening to someone else. I remember asking practical questions because panic felt useless in that moment. Treatment options, costs, time. Time was the one thing we didn't have. His mother, my wife, had passed 2 years earlier in a car accident. So it was just me and Ethan, just us. And when the doctors told me the experimental treatment wasn't covered by insurance, I knew exactly where I was going to turn. My family had money. Old money. Inheritance money. Trust funds. And don't worry about it. Money. My parents had set aside a fund, years and $500,000 for family emergencies. They'd said it themselves. Emergencies. That word echoed in my head as I drove to their house that night. I didn't go in angry. I went in hopeful. I sat at their kitchen table. The same table where Ethan used to color while my mother made pancake sand. I explained everything. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't beg. I told them the facts, the prognosis, the cost, the chance. Small, but real. My father stared at his hands. My mother cried quietly, dabbing her eyes with a cloth napkin like she always did. My sister sat back in her chair, arms crossed. When I finished, the room went silent. Then my sister spoke. She said, "That money is already allocated." I remember blinking. Allocated to what? She looked at my parents, then barked at me. Me? I need it. Need. The word hit wrong. For what? I asked. She sighed, like I was exhausting her. I need a fresh start. After the divorce, I'm moving, starting over therapy. New place, new life. My father cleared his throat. We've already agreed. I felt something shift in my chest. You're telling me? You won't use the emergency fund to try to save your grandson's life. My mother whispered, "We can't fix everything." I stood up slowly. My hands were shaking, but my voice didn't. I'm not asking you to fix everything. I'm asking you to help me save my son. My sister rolled her eyes. You're being emotional. That was it. That was the moment something in me cracked clean through. I left without yelling, without slamming doors. I walked out like a ghost. The treatment never happened. Ethan lasted another 6 weeks. 6 weeks of hospital rooms and whispered bedtime stories, and pretending not to notice how scared he was. I slept in a chair beside his bed. I learned how to smile while dying inside. The night he passed, he squeezed my hand and asked me if it was okay to rest. I told him yes. I lied. The funeral was small. I didn't invite my family. They didn't ask to come. I buried my son alone. I remember standing there after everyone else had left the grave dig. The priest, the single neighbor who had shown up, and feeling the silence pressed in on me until I couldn't see. Dirt still clung to my shoes. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't check it. Later that night, I did. It was a photo from my sister's champagne glasses, raised, smiling faces, my parents in the background. A caption that read, "New Beginnings." I stared at that screen until the words stopped making sense. Then I turned the phone off. For a long time after that, I didn't feel anything. Not anger, not sadness, just emptiness. I went to work. I came home. I cooked meals I didn't eat. I washed dishes that were already clean. Weeks passed, then months, and in that silence when the grief finally settled into something cold and heavy, something else took its place. Clarity. They hadn't pushed me, they hadn't yelled, they hadn't threatened me, they'd smiled. They'd toasted, they'd celebrated, and I realized something that changed everything. They hadn't chosen my sister over my son in a moment of weakness. They'd planned it, and once I understood that, I stopped mourning. I started paying attention in the quietest ways possible. Not out of anger. Anger is loud, sloppy. It burns itself out. What I felt was colder than that. Heavier. Like grief had finally hardened into something solid I could hold. I watched how my family moved on. My parents posted pictures from my sister's healing retreat. Ocean views, yoga mats, sunset dinners, captions about growth and gratitude. My sister sold her house, bought a condo downtown, started a podcast about reinventing yourself after trauma. She talked about resilience, about starting fresh. She never mentioned Ethan. Not once. I didn't confront them. I didn't block them either. I answered messages politely. Short, neutral. I let them believe I was broken in the way people expect grief to break you: quiet, compliant, folded inward. In reality, I was learning. I learned that the money had been transferred 3 days before I walked into that kitchen. 3 days before I begged. They hadn't even hesitated. The decision was already made. I learned that my sister's divorce hadn't left her desperate. Her ex had paid a generous settlement. Tea Fund wasn't tea about survival. It was about lifestyle. And the most important thing I learned, that fund wasn't tea as clean as they thought. My father had always managed the family finances, trusts, shell accounts, creative allocations, nothing illegal on paper but close enough to the edge that everything depended on silence and appearances. On no one ever asking too many questions, and I had time now. A lot of it. I went back through old emails, old paperwork, documents I'd signed years ago without reading carefully. Because I trusted them, I started seeing patterns. Transfers that didn't line up, accounts that existed only on paper, money that moved in circles before landing where it wasn't supposed to. I didn't rush. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I worked my job during the day, came home to an empty house, and spent nights learning the language of financial compliance, IRS guidelines, trust law, reporting thresholds. Grief kept me awake anyway. I just gave it something to focus on. The first time I realized how deep it went, I had to sit down. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from the weight of what I was holding. They hadn't just chosen convenience over my son's life. They'd been careless, arrogant. They assumed no one would ever look closely. They forgot about me months passé. My sister announced her fresh start on social media with a glossy video and a soft piano track. My parents commented with heart emoji. Friends congratulated her bravery. I attended none of it. I stayed invisible. Then, one night, I opened a file that made my chest tighten. It was the emergency fund, the one they told me was already allocated. It was still labeled for medical contingencies, still described as family emergency reserves. The paperwork had never been updated, only the money had moved. Quietly, improperly. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I closed the laptop and went to bed. I didn't sleep because now I knew exactly what I was going to do. Not fast, not loud, not cruel, legal, precise, permanent. I wasn't going to take anything from them. I was going to make them answer for what they'd already done. The first call I made wasn't it to a lawyer. It was to a therapist, not for forgiveness, not for closure, for stability. I needed someone to make sure I didn't cross the line into something that would undo everything, someone to keep me grounded while I dismantled the illusion they'd built around themselves. Once a week, I sat in that office and talked about Ethan, about the hospital, about the kitchen table, about the photo with champagne glasses, and every time I walked out, my resolve felt sharper. The second call was to a forensic accountant. I didn't tell him my whole story. I didn't need to. I asked questions. Hypotheticals. If someone misused a trust fund labeled for emergencies, what would happen? If funds were transferred under false pretenses, who would be liable? His answers were calm, methodical, terrifying. I began compiling everything. No accusations, no commentary, just facts, dates, amounts, documents. I moved slowly on purpose. I let my sister get comfortable, let my parents settle into the belief that time had softened me. That grief had made me passive. On the anniversary of Ethan's death, my mother sent me a message. We miss him every day. I didn't reply. Instead, I finished organizing the last folder. 10 primera waited 3 more months. Because timing matters. And when everything was ready, when there was nothing emotional left in my movements only, intention, I took a breath, and I pressed send. The email didn't go to my family. It went to 3 places at once. The first was the compliance department of the firm that managed my parents' trusts. The second was the IRS whistleblower office. The third was a civil attorney who specialized in fiduciary abuse. No accusations, no emotional language, no mention of my son, just documentation. Clean, organized, irrefutable. I attached everything. The original designation of the emergency fund. The transfer records, the timing, the internal notes that contradicted public filings, and the paper trail showing the money had been used for non-emergency personal expenses while still being reported as reserved medical contingency funds. I didn't ask for revenge. I asked for review. Then I shut my laptop and made dinner. The first sign something was happening came 4 days later. My father called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. His voice was tight, unfamiliar. We need to talk. Immediately. I didn't call back. The second sign came a week after that. My sister texted me at 2:14 a.m. What did you do? I turned my phone face down and went back to sleep. By the end of the second week, the silence broke. The trust firm froze multiple accounts pending investigation. My parents' financial advisor stopped returning their calls. My sister's condo purchase stalled when her funds were flagged during routine verification. No one was arrested. No one was publicly accused. Not yet. What happened instead was worse. Questions, audits, letters that started with phrases like, "Upon review," and "discrepancies have been identified." My parents tried to reach me every day. My mother left messages that sounded small and frightened. My father's were clipped, angry, confused. He couldn't understand how this was happening, how the world he'd controlled so carefully was suddenly asking him to explain himself. My sister came last. She showed up at my house without warning. I opened the door and saw a woman who looked nothing like the one from the champagne photo. Her hair was pulled back messily. Her eyes were red. She held her phone like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Tell me this isn't you," she said. "I didn't invite her in." "I didn't lie," I said. Her mouth opened, closed. "You did this because of Ethan." I looked at her. Really looked at her. "I did this because the truth matters," I said. "What you did already happened." She laughed, sharp and hysterical. "You're ruining us." I didn't raise my voice. "No, I'm letting people see you." She stared at me for a long time, tense aside, quieter. "You could have asked again." I felt something then. Not anger, not even pain, just exhaustion. "I did," I said, "in that kitchen." "Remember?" She left without another word. The investigations took months. No dramatic courtroom scenes. No public scandal, just steady pressure, interviews, reviews, reclassifications, penalties, back, taxes, fines, fees. The emergency fund was officially deemed misused. The trust firm severed ties with my parents. Their financial reputations, something they'd guarded for decades, was quietly destroyed. Doors closed. Advisors declined. Invitations stopped. My sister lost the condo. Her Fresh Start podcast ended when sponsors pulled out after her finances became unstable. She blamed everyone. Loudly. Online. No one listened. Eventually, a settlement was reached. A large one. The money didn't come to me. I didn't want it. It went to charities, medical foundations, pediatric cancer research. Quietly, without my name attached, one foundation sent a thank you letter addressed simply to the donor. I framed it and put it next to Ethan's photo. My parents tried to reconcile. They asked for forgiveness. They said they'd made a mistake. I never argued with them. I just said, I know. And I meant it, because mistakes are momentary. What they did was deliberate. I don't see them anymore. Not out of spite, out of peace. My life is quieter now, smaller, honest. I still wake up some nights expecting to hear Ethan call for me. I still catch myself buying his favorite cereal. Grief doesn't vanish, it just changes shape. But I can breathe. I did what I needed to do, not to punish, not to destroy, but to balance something that had been tilted too far. If you've ever been hurt in a way that felt invisible, if someone celebrated while you were burying something sacred, just know this: you don't need to scream. You don't need to explode. You don't need to become someone you don't recognize. Sometimes the most haunting consequences come from simply telling the truth and stepping aside. If this story stayed with you, if you understand the kind of quiet justice I'm talking about, you know why these stories matter. And if you want to hear more of them, you know where to find me.